How would you describe this report that just came out that found that more than 2,000 cases may have not been investigated?
Yeah, it's honestly, it's shocking and it's quite frankly appalling.
Negligence and disorganization within Aurora's police department.
This isn't just records, this is victims that we're talking about.
Denver 7 Investigates was the first to uncover the backlog of cases leaving victims in the dark.
There hasn't even been an attempt at justice because they haven't been investigated.
Tonight, we look into this scathing report and what's being done to right the wrongs that have been happening for years.
The only thing I can say is I'm sorry. We need to do better.
First, though, we have a Denver 7 weather action day in effect for you. This wind, look at this, kicked up all this dust. This is near Fort Collins today. And the dry conditions combined with the strong winds keeps our fire danger high across the Front Range through tomorrow. Glad you're with us tonight at 6 o'clock. I'm Shannon Ogden.
And I'm Jacqueline Allen. The winds caused several ski resorts to either close down today or shut entirely, including Loveland Ski Area and Echo Mountain.
All right, let's go to our chief meteorologist, Mike Nelson. Mike, we saw gusts over 100 miles per hour today.
We certainly did. Let me take you up to the top of the Continental Divide. This is a time lapse over the last 2 hours from Loveland Ski Area. You can see the clouds kind of breaking a little bit, but the camera bouncing along in those very strong winds. And here are some of the greatest gusts we had today. Berthoud Pass, 116 miles per hour. Peak 8 at Breckenridge, 103. Loveland Pass at 80. And even at Georgetown, 65 miles per hour. Now, those winds continue quite strong at Berthoud, 68 right at the moment. Broomfield at 41. And the warnings are still in effect across much of the state. Weather advisories till midnight in the mountains. And we still have the high wind warnings on the plains. They will be expiring later on tonight. A little bit of light precipitation out on the plains. It was mostly sprinkles of rain and maybe a little bit of snow. The snow in the mountains will linger tonight. The gusty winds will continue on the plains, gradually lightening up a little bit tomorrow. So our weather headlines, the winds will stay strong for a bit, but it does look like nicer days are on the way, especially by opening day for the Rockies on Friday.
Thank you, Mike. We'll see you a little bit later. Aurora police have an obligation to investigate crimes reported by the community, but a new report tonight shows they have not held up their end of the bargain.
Yeah, more than 2,500 reports were backlogged for investigation, and this includes everything from child sex abuse to murder and carjackings.
Denver 7 investigative reporter Jennifer Covalessi was the first to break this. So Aurora now says they've gotten through about half of this backlog cases.
Shannon and Jacqueline, they've made progress since this report first came out last month, but it still uncovered thousands of cases that were never investigated, leaving victims without justice. A 4-page report finding a massive records backlog in Aurora, 2,500 serious crimes never investigated, cases including murder, child abuse, and carjackings going back to last year.
It's honestly, it's shocking and it's quite frankly appalling.
City Councilman Dustin Zvonik is chair of Aurora's Public Safety Committee. He's now calling for accountability.
I'm deeply concerned and I hope that there is accountability for any and everybody who's involved with not bringing this forward sooner.
How does a city as large as Aurora fail to investigate more than 2,000 cases?
I think we need to figure out what it was that led to this backlog. And for me, this is just another example of the systemic failure of the leadership in our police department.
The report from an outside agency says the delays put the police department at an astounding risk and huge liability. It also says the backlog enabled suspects who might have otherwise been investigated and taken into custody to reoffend. What is your message to victims?
The only thing I can say is I'm sorry. The city of Aurora has apparently dropped the ball for quite a long time.
Councilman Curtis Gardner says the city and police department must do better.
To think that there's a murder that happened in our community that supposedly hasn't even been investigated yet because the record hasn't been put into the system, that's concerning.
This all comes amid efforts to oust Aurora Police Chief Vanessa Wilson. Multiple sources continue to say Wilson is on her way out, but is still negotiating her exit through an attorney. Does the chief have responsibility with what happened?
Absolutely, she does. In the report, it says that the police department actually knew about this problem.
Wilson's attorney says Chief Wilson did not create this problem and cannot be blamed for it. Her attorney stresses Wilson has raised this ongoing issue for a long time and has been asking for additional resources to fix it.
It's just another attempt to throw mud on Chief Wilson and claim this is all her fault so they could justify terminating her.
We asked Chief Wilson's attorney about those ongoing talks about her future. Her attorney tells me that it's very difficult to have negotiations when you are, quote, trying to wipe the mud off your windshield. She also questioned why this report was released today. City leaders maintain that this has nothing to do with those efforts. They point out that this report was finalized last month and those conversations didn't start until much later.
All right, Jen, thank you. Sharp work tonight on this story. And Aurora City Manager Jim Twombly says this report was very alarming to him as well. In a statement, he says the issues it identified are patently unacceptable. While the consultant discusses them in terms of liability, I see them as a risk and danger to our officers and the community. And we just heard from the 17th and 18th district attorneys within the past 10 minutes. In a joint statement, DA Brian Mason and DA John Kellner say, our first concern is to ensure that the public and specifically victims of crime are protected. Failures in processing police reports of new crimes or processing reports in ongoing investigations must be remedied. They go on to say, immediately remedied to both protect the public and the integrity of existing cases.
All right, Aurora City Manager Jim Twombly says they have already made some changes in response to this report. There's now a police lieutenant with a prior records management experience overseeing the records office. All remote work has been shifted back to in-person. The records office will close to the public on Wednesdays just to focus on this backlog. Now, police officers who are assigned to light duty will also be trained on the transcription process and will temporarily fill in for the records office. You can find our full reporting on both this latest audit and the future of Chief Wilson's job right now on thedenverchannel.com.
Some extra relief today for the nearly 800,000 Coloradans who owe $28 billion total in federal student loan debt. President Biden is planning to extend the moratorium on payments through August 31st. The moratorium was to come to an end April 31st. As Denver 7's Russell Haythorne learned, this extra time will allow so many Coloradans to stay afloat.
Madison Bartolome knows the feeling of crushing student loan debt.
Loans are putting myself and my family in a complete deficit.
And while she is getting some help from her mom,
I have 2 siblings and it's tough. So it's like I don't want to ask anything of her.
And she's not alone.
Something you think about every day.
By the end of college, I would be almost $120,000.
Probably like 20.
60 to 80.
Max like 7K.
Jason Ortega says he's already paying interest.
I've taken out unsubsidized loans, so I already have interest rates like accumulating.
44 million Americans carry student loan debt, including 800,000 Coloradans. The nonprofit Brookings Institute estimates total student loan debt around $1.5 trillion in the U.S.
Some even have monthly payments over $1,000.
The Biden administration is delaying payments on federal student debt through August, the 5th extension since the start of the pandemic. Congressional leaders are also still considering canceling out large sums of student loan debt.
That'd be great. That'd be great. That would help a lot. That's a fresh start, basically.
College is expensive, especially being out of state. It's a struggle, but we work to survive.
A struggle Bartolome and others are hoping gets a little easier soon. Russell Haythorne, Denver 7.
And it still remains in question whether the president will pursue widespread debt forgiveness. Now, some Democrats in Congress have pushed for Biden to cancel $50,000 in debt for all student loan borrowers.
So what are some of the best ways to pay off student loan debt when payments resume? You can take a look at refinancing your loans. This could get you a lower interest rate as well as a lower payment. Now, there are some income-driven repayment plans as well, which are based on income and family size. Your monthly payment could be reduced to 0, or you could meet the requirements for public service loan forgiveness. That requires working for an eligible public service or nonprofit and making at least 120 payments.
About 200 people made their way to the steps of the state capitol today to hear MyPillow CEO Mike Lindell and Mesa County Clerk of Courts Tina Peters repeat their claims of the stolen election. Also in attendance, Republican State Representatives Dave Williams, Mark Baisley, Ron Hanks, and Richard Holtorf. Now, all of them took to the podium to talk about their lack of trust in the election system that, well, got them elected. Now, Democratic Senate President Steve Fenberg also stopped by. He is sponsoring the election security bill that is drawn up in direct response to how Tina Peters handled the election in Mesa County.
And state health officials are starting to send text messages to Coloradans, alerting them about new COVID vaccine recommendations. Over the next 2 weeks, those 65 and older will receive texts about the availability of receiving a 4th dose. Those 50 and older who have not received their 3rd dose will be reminded as well.
If you're a homeowner in the Denver metro area, your home value appreciated on average 9% just over the last month. According to the monthly update from the Denver Metro Association of Realtors, homes are still selling so quickly. The average Metro home sold in 4 days or less after they were listed in March. Mortgage rates also on the rise. According to Mortgage News Daily, the 30-year fixed is now above 5% for the first time since 2013.
I want to share my story to kind of help humanize and make it personal for everyone.
A distracted driver nearly took his life.
It's important to also recognize that when people are seriously injured, that life goes on.
Now he dedicates his life to protecting others from distracted drivers.
Still pretty windy out there. I do have some good news, though, coming up in the 7-day.
Plus, the Pios are off to Boston with a 9th national championship in their sights.